The year was 2847, and humanity had finally earned a seat at the Galactic Concord. This was the governing body of 17 spacefaring civilizations that controlled a large section of the galaxy called the Orion Arm. For centuries, humans had dreamed of joining the stars. Now they were here, but the welcome was far from warm. Admiral Catherine Cole stood at the viewport of the UES Resolute, Earth's flagship carrier. She was a tall woman in her 60s with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind her stretched humanity's fleet, 12 vessels in total. They were the pride of Earth's public space force, painted in the blue and white colors of the United Earth government. "Approaching Concord Station," announced Captain Daniel Perry from his command chair. He was younger than Cole, in his early 40s, with a square jaw and nervous energy that he tried hard to hide. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral." Cole nodded but said nothing. She watched as the massive space station grew larger in the viewport. It was a spinning ring of metal and light, home to ambassadors and diplomats from across the galaxy. Today, it would also be the stage for humanity's first military demonstration. The Valkorian Empire had demanded it. High Lord Thesson, their ambassador, had insisted that every member species must show their military strength. It was tradition, he claimed, a way to prove worthiness. But Cole knew better. This was humiliation dressed up as ceremony. The Resolute entered the observation zone first. One by one, the other human vessels followed. Cruisers, destroyers, and support ships. They moved in perfect formation, their crews executing maneuvers they had practiced 1,000 times. Inside the Concorde chamber, representatives from 17 species watched on massive display screens. The Valkorians sat in the highest seats, their purple skin and golden eyes marking them as the dominant power in this region of space. Their ships were legendary, planet-sized dreadnoughts that could crack worlds in half. When humanity's fleet came into full view, the chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter began. High Lord Thesson was the first to react. He threw back his head and let out a booming laugh that echoed off the chamber walls. His clawed hand pointed at the display screen. "These are your warships?" he roared with amusement. "They are barely larger than our escape pods." The Kreth delegation joined in next. These insectoid creatures made clicking sounds that served as their version of laughter. Their compound eyes reflected the image of humanity's tiny fleet. Even the Sonari, usually known for their diplomatic politeness, could not hide their smiles. Their blue-skinned faces showed clear amusement at the sight of Earth's military might, or lack of it. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Perry clenched his jaw so hard that Cole could hear his teeth grinding. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am," he said through tight lips. "Denied," Cole replied. Her voice was calm, almost bored. "Let them laugh." Perry stared at her in disbelief. "Admiral, they're broadcasting this across the entire sector. Every species in the Concord is watching humanity become a joke." "I know." Cole's eyes never left the viewport. "That's exactly what we want." Before Perry could respond, the communication system crackled to life. High Lord Thesson's voice filled the bridge. "Admiral Cole, on behalf of the Galactic Concord, I welcome humanity to our gathering. Your presentation has been most entertaining." More laughter could be heard in the background. "Perhaps your species would be better suited to cleaning our stations than defending them. We have openings for maintenance workers if your people are interested." Cole's expression remained unchanged. "The United Earth government thanks you for your welcome, High Lord. We are honored to serve the Concord in whatever capacity is most useful." She cut the transmission before Thesson could respond. "Admiral!" Perry was on his feet now. "We can't just accept that kind of insult." "Sit down, Captain." Cole's voice carried an edge of command that Perry had rarely heard. "That is an order." He sat, but his face burned with shame and anger. Back on Earth, the broadcast was being watched in the highest levels of government. President Marcus Webb sat in the Situation Room beneath the capital city, surrounded by his military council. The laughter of alien species filled the room through speakers. General Lisa Monroe slammed her fist on the table. She was a stocky woman with cropped gray hair and a scar running down her left cheek. "This is humiliation on a galactic scale," she growled. 300 years of preparation, and we're being treated like children playing with toy ships." "That's the point, General." The voice came from the far end of the table. Dr. Samuel Grant was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the quiet confidence of someone who knew secrets others did not. He was the head of Project Phantom, a name that made even senior military officials nervous. "They're looking at our public fleet," Grant continued. 12 ships that we've allowed the galaxy to see. 12 ships that we've intentionally kept small and unimpressive." He smiled slightly. "They have no idea what's waiting in the dark." President Webb leaned forward. "The Valkorians are pushing for expansion into our territory. Intelligence suggests they'll make their move within the year." "Let them push," Grant replied. "When the time comes, they'll learn the truth about humanity. And by then, it will be far too late." In the conquered chamber, the laughter continued. Species that had been conquering worlds when humans were still living in caves looked at Earth's fleet and saw nothing worth fearing. The Valkorians began discussing how they would divide human colony worlds among themselves. The Kreth debated whether humans would make good slaves or simply good food. None of them noticed the small smile that crossed Admiral Cole's face as she watched from the Resolute. She had played her part perfectly. For 20 years she had attended diplomatic functions and endured insults. She had commanded the public fleet and pretended that these 12 ships were the best humanity could offer. She had let herself become the face of a weak and helpless species. It was all a lie. Deep in the asteroid belts beyond Earth's solar system, hidden in hollowed-out rocks and abandoned mining stations, something else waited. Something the galaxy had never seen. Something that would change everything. The Silent War Armada. 500 ships built in absolute secrecy over 3 centuries. Vessels equipped with technology that the Valkorians couldn't imagine. Crews trained for a single purpose, to remind the galaxy that humanity was not prey. Admiral Cole turned away from the viewport and walked to her ready room. Once inside, she locked the door and activated a secure communication channel that only a handful of people in the entire government knew existed. "This is Cole," she said quietly. "The demonstration is complete. They believe what we wanted them to believe." A voice responded, distorted, unrecognizable. "Acknowledged, Admiral. Project Phantom remains on schedule. When the Valkorians make their move, we will be ready." Cole nodded to herself. 300 years of hiding. 300 years of being laughed at. It's almost time to show them who we really are. She cut the transmission and sat alone in the darkness of her ready room. Outside, the laughter continued. But Catherine Cole was not worried. The galaxy would learn soon enough that there was nothing funny about humanity. 300 years ago, humanity learned a terrible lesson. The year was 2541, and the colony ship Horizon was carrying 50,000 settlers to a new world in the Alpha Centauri system. They were farmers, teachers, doctors, and engineers, ordinary people looking for a fresh start among the stars. None of them had ever seen an alien before. The Kreth raiders found them halfway through their journey. The insectoid creatures did not try to communicate. They did not ask for surrender. They simply attacked. Their clawed ships tore through the Horizon's weak defenses in minutes. What followed was 3 days of horror that humanity would never forget. When the Kreth finally left, only wreckage remained. 2 million people across 5 colony ships died in the First Contact massacre. The bodies were never recovered. Earth's governments had always argued with each other. Nations fought over land, resources, and power. But the massacre changed everything. Within 1 year, the United Earth government was formed. Within 5 years, a secret decision was made that would shape humanity's future. They would never be victims again. Commander Nathan Brooks stood in the hollowed-out asteroid designated Site Omega. He was a tall man in his 50s, with dark skin and a shaved head. His uniform was black with no markings, the uniform of the silent war Armada. Before him stretched the main construction bay. 500 vessels floated in perfect rows, their hulls painted in a coating that absorbed all forms of detection. These were not the small, weak ships of Earth's public fleet. These were predators. "Final systems check complete," reported Lieutenant Amy Fisher from her station nearby. She was a young woman with red hair tied back in a tight bun. Her fingers moved across holographic displays with practiced speed. "All ships reporting green across the board." Brooks nodded slowly. "Stealth coding?" "Holding steady at 100% efficiency. The Valkorians' most advanced sensors won't detect us until we're already inside their shields." "Weapons systems?" "Charged and ready. The pulse cannons can disable a dreadnought in 3 shots. The boarding drones are loaded and waiting." Brooks walked to the main viewport. Outside, the asteroid field stretched into infinity, millions of rocks floating in the darkness between planets. To any passing ship, Site Omega looked like just another dead rock. That was exactly the point. 300 years, he said quietly. "My great-great-great-grandmother was one of the first engineers on this project. She spent her entire life building ships she knew she would never see used." Fisher joined him at the viewport. "Do you think she knew it would take this long?" "She knew it would take as long as necessary. That's what makes us different from the Valkorians." He turned to face his lieutenant. "They think in terms of conquest and expansion. We think in terms of survival." At the far end of the construction bay, a door opened. Dr. Patricia Holmes walked through, her white lab coat standing out against the dark uniforms of the military personnel. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Commander Brooks, Lieutenant Fisher," she said by way of greeting. "The final weapons briefing is ready. All senior officers are assembling in the war room." They followed her through a series of corridors carved deep into the asteroid. Security checkpoints scanned their identities at every turn. Finally, they reached a large chamber where 50 officers waited around a circular table. Dr. Holmes took her place at the front of the room. Behind her, a holographic display flickered to life, showing detailed images of Valkorian warships. "For 3 centuries we have studied our potential enemies," she began. "We know their weapons, we know their tactics, we know their weaknesses, and most importantly, we know their psychology." The display shifted to show a massive Valkorian dreadnought, a ship so large it made Earth's public vessels look like insects. The Valkorians believe that size equals power. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming force. They build the biggest ships, carry the most weapons, and expect their enemies to either surrender or die. Holmes smiled slightly. "They have never faced an enemy that refuses to play by their rules." "What do you mean?" asked one of the younger officers. "I mean that Valkorian ships are designed for conventional warfare. They expect their enemies to line up and exchange fire in open space. Shield against shield, cannon against cannon. That's how they fought for 1,000 years. The display changed again, now showing a human vessel, sleek, dark, and almost invisible against the blackness of space. "Our ships don't fight like that. We don't have the resources to match them gun for gun, so instead we learn to fight from the shadows. Our vessels can approach within meters of an enemy ship without being detected. We can disable their systems before they even know we're there. We can appear, strike, and vanish before they can respond." Commander Brooks spoke up. The Valkorians have never lost a major battle. They've conquered hundreds of species across the galaxy. What makes you think we can beat them? Because they've never fought humans. Holmes's voice was confident. Every species they've faced has tried to match their strength directly. They've all failed, but humanity learned a different lesson from our first contact with the galaxy. Her eyes hardened. We learned that if you can't win a fair fight, you make sure the fight is never fair. The briefing continued for another hour. Officers learned about weapons that could slice through Valkorian shields like paper. They studied tactics designed to create maximum confusion with minimum exposure. They memorized communication codes that would keep their movements coordinated even in the chaos of battle. When it was over, Brooks remained behind as the other officers filed out. Dr. Holmes approached him. "You seem troubled, Commander." "I've spent my entire career preparing for a war I hoped would never happen." He looked at the holographic display, still showing the outline of a human stealth ship. "Now that it's coming, I'm not sure how to feel." "That's what makes you the right person to lead the first strike." Holmes put a hand on his shoulder. "The Valkorians fight because they enjoy conquest. We fight because we have no other choice. That difference matters more than you might think." "How so?" "Because they fight for glory. We fight for survival. And there is no creature more dangerous than one fighting for its life." At that moment, across the galaxy, High Lord Thesson was addressing the Valkorian High Council. He stood in a chamber of gold and purple, surrounded by the leaders of an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. "Humanity is weak," he declared. "Their fleet is laughable. Their colonies are undefended. I propose that we claim their territory for the glory of the Empire." The council members nodded in agreement. None of them saw any reason to fear the small species from the unremarkable planet called Earth. They had crushed hundreds of civilizations before. This would be no different. As Thesson outlined his plans for conquest, he had no idea that 500 invisible ships were waiting in the darkness. He had no idea that every word he spoke was being recorded by sensors so advanced that the Valkorians didn't know they existed. And he had no idea that humanity had been waiting 300 years for exactly this moment. The Silent War Armada was ready. Soon the galaxy would learn the truth about the species they had mocked. And when they did, nothing would ever be the same again. 3 months had passed since the humiliation at Concord Station. Across the galaxy, the footage of humanity's tiny fleet was still being shared and laughed at. Alien children watched it for entertainment. Military academies used it as an example of what not to do. But High Lord Thesson was done laughing. Now he wanted action. The Galactic Concord chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 17 member species sat in their designated sections. The air hummed with the quiet conversations of diplomats who sensed that something important was about to happen. Thesson rose from his elevated seat, his purple robes flowing around him like liquid gold. His golden eyes swept across the assembly, and silence fell immediately. When the High Lord of the Valkorian Empire spoke, everyone listened. "Honored members of the Conquered," he began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, "I come before you today with a matter of great importance." Ambassador Christopher Lane sat in humanity's small section near the back of the chamber. He was a middle-aged man with graying temples and calm brown eyes that had seen dozens of diplomatic crises. Beside him, his aide, a young woman named Rebecca Harris, was quietly recording everything. "Something's wrong," Rebecca whispered. "The Valkorians never request formal sessions unless they want to make a show of something." Lane nodded slightly. "Stay alert, and make sure the secure channel to Earth is open." On the main floor, Thesson continued his speech. "For too long, we have allowed certain species to occupy territory that they cannot properly defend or develop. This is a waste of resources. It is an insult to the Concord's mission of galactic prosperity." Lane felt his stomach tighten. He knew where this was going. "Therefore," Thesson announced, The Valkorian Empire formally claims sovereignty over the human colonies in the Tau Ceti system. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some species looked surprised. Others, those who had been expecting this, simply nodded. Lane was on his feet immediately. The Tau Ceti colonies are sovereign territory of the United Earth Government. They have been settled for over 200 years. 40 million humans live there. Thesson turned to face him, a thin smile on his lips. 40 million humans who cannot be properly protected by their government's military capabilities. He said the last words with obvious mockery. Surely, Ambassador, you must see that leaving such a population undefended is irresponsible. Our people are not undefended. Really? Thesson gestured, and the chamber's display screens lit up with footage of humanity's fleet, the same 12 ships that had been laughed at 3 months ago. These are your defenders? These toys? Ambassador Lane, I have personal yachts larger than your flagship. Laughter rippled through parts of the chamber. Lane remained standing, his expression unchanged. What exactly are you proposing, High Lord? Thesson's smile widened. Humanity will surrender its colony worlds in the Tau Ceti system. Your species clearly lacks the military capacity to defend them. Consider this a mercy. We will relocate your colonists rather than simply exterminate them. They will be given work assignments appropriate to their abilities. The meaning was clear. Slavery. 40 million humans would become servants of the Valkorian Empire. And if we refuse? Lane asked quietly. For the first time, Thesson's pleasant mask slipped. His golden eyes hardened, and his voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. Then the Valkorian Third Fleet will reduce your colonies to ash, and we will take them anyway. You have 72 hours to decide. He paused, letting the threat sink in. Use the time wisely, Ambassador. This is the only offer your species will receive. Thesson swept out of the chamber without waiting for a response. His delegation followed, leaving humanity's small corner in silence. Rebecca's hands were shaking as she turned to Lane. Sir, what do we do? We can't fight the Third Fleet. We can't... Contact Earth, Lane interrupted. Priority Alpha. Tell them the timeline has accelerated. On the UES Resolute, Admiral Catherine Cole received the news within minutes. She was in her ready room, reviewing patrol schedules, when Captain Daniel Perry burst through the door. Admiral, we just received word from the Concorde. The Valkorians have issued an ultimatum. Tau Ceti, 72 hours. Cole set down her tablet slowly. So, they finally made their move. Ma'am, our public fleet can't stop the Third Fleet. We don't have the firepower, the numbers, or the... I know what our public fleet can and cannot do, Captain. Cole stood and walked to her private terminal. Leave me. I need to send a message. Perry hesitated. Admiral, if I may, for the past 3 months I've noticed things. Encrypted communications. Secret meetings. I've served under you for 10 years, and I've never seen you this calm about a threat like this. He stepped closer. There's something you're not telling me. Cole studied him for a long moment. Then she made a decision. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. If you repeat it to anyone without authorization, you will be tried for treason. Do you understand? Perry nodded slowly. The fleet you've been serving in, the 12 ships we showed at Concord, is not our real military. What? It's a decoy. A distraction. Something to keep the galaxy from looking too closely at what we've been building in secret for the past 300 years. Cole's eyes met his. Captain Perry, we have a fleet that the Valkorians have never seen. 500 ships, equipped with technology they can't imagine. We call it the Silent War Armada. Perry sat down heavily in a chair. 500 ships. That's impossible. The resources, the manpower, the secrecy required. 3 centuries of sacrifice. Generations of men and women who worked their entire lives on ships they knew they might never see used. Cole's voice softened slightly. My mother was one of them. So was my grandmother. This has been humanity's true project since the First Contact massacre. Why are you telling me this now? Because in 72 hours the Armada will reveal itself. And when that happens, I'm going to need officers I can trust. She handed him a secure data pad. These are your new orders. Study them, memorize them, then destroy the pad. Perry took the device with trembling hands. Admiral, can we really win against the Valkorians? Cole smiled, the first genuine smile Perry had seen from her in months. The Valkorians have spent 1,000 years conquering species that fight the way they expect. They've never faced an enemy that refuses to be seen. She turned back to her terminal. Signal the fleet. We're jumping to coordinates that aren't in any official database. It's time to meet the rest of our family. At Site Omega, Commander Nathan Brooks received encrypted orders from Earth. He read them twice, then looked up at Lieutenant Amy Fisher. Operation Silent Thunder is authorized, he said simply. Fisher's eyes widened. Sir, this is it? We're actually doing this? We're actually doing this. Brooks turned to address the command center. All ships, prepare for departure. We've been hiding in the dark for 300 years. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. Around him, 500 ships powered up their engines. Crews who had trained their entire lives moved with practiced efficiency. They had always known this day might come. Now it was here. In 72 hours, the Valkorian Empire expected humanity to surrender. They were going to be very, very surprised. The Valkorian Third Fleet was the pride of the Empire. 2,000 vessels anchored around the gas giant Thesson Prime, named after the High Lord's family. At the center of the formation floated the flagship Dominance of Stars, 3 kilometers of metal, weapons, and arrogance. Fleet Commander Vorath stood on its bridge, watching the countdown to humanity's deadline. He was a veteran of 40 campaigns, his purple skin marked with golden tattoos that showed his victories. In his entire career, he had never lost a battle. Any response from the humans? He asked his tactical officer. Their pathetic fleet has jumped away from Concord Station. Long-range sensors track them heading toward their home system. The officer made a sound of contempt. Probably fleeing to Earth. Cowards. Vorath smiled. He had expected as much. The weak always ran when faced with true strength. Begin preparations for the assault on Tau Ceti. Once the deadline passes, I want our first wave ready to jump within the hour. He settled into his command chair. Make an example of their colonies. Leave nothing standing. I want the galaxy to see what happens to species that waste our time. Yes, Fleet Commander. All ships report ready for... The lights flickered. Every display on the bridge went dark for half a second before coming back online. Vorath sat up straight, his golden eyes narrowing. What was that? Unknown, Commander. Running diagnostics now. The tactical officer's claws moved across his console. All systems appear normal. No explanation for the interruption. Check with engineering. I want answers. But before the officer could respond, something else happened. The communications console lit up with incoming reports from across the fleet. Commander, the destroyer Wrath of Thesson is reporting sensor malfunctions. The carrier Pride of Victory says their weapons systems have locked up. Multiple ships reporting navigation errors. Vorath was on his feet now. Get me a fleet-wide status report. Now. The tactical display flickered again. When it stabilized, Vorath felt his blood run cold. The destroyer Wrath of Thesson was gone. Not destroyed, not fleeing, just gone. One moment it was there on the sensors. The next moment, empty space. Where is that ship? Vorath demanded. We don't know, Commander. Sensors show nothing. No debris, no energy signature, no jump trail. It's like it was never there. That's impossible. Ships don't just vanish. Another alert. Another ship gone. The cruiser Hammer of Thesan. 2,000 crew members, vanished, then 3 more, then 10, then 50. Across the mighty Third Fleet, ships were disappearing without explanation. Some reported brief power failures before going silent. Others simply stopped responding. And Vorath's sensors showed nothing. No attackers, no weapons fire, nothing that could explain what was happening. "All ships! Defensive formation!" he roared. "Shields to maximum! Weapons ready!" But how do you defend against an enemy you can't see? 300 meters from the dominance of stars, Commander Nathan Brooks watched through the viewport of the UES Phantom. His ship was close enough to see individual windows on the Valkorian flagship, close enough to count the gun turrets on its hull, close enough to reach out and touch it, metaphorically speaking. And they had no idea he was there. "Phase 1 complete," Lieutenant Fisher reported from her station. 87 Valkorian vessels disabled and captured. Boarding teams have secured their crews. No casualties on either side. Brooks nodded. The plan was working perfectly. The Silent War Armada had jumped into the middle of the Valkorian formation completely undetected. Their stealth coating absorbed every form of sensor sweep the enemy used. To Valkorian instruments, space around them was completely empty. But it wasn't empty. It was full of ghosts. "Phase 2, Brooks ordered. "Light them up." Across the void, 500 human vessels simultaneously dropped their stealth fields. They appeared as if from nowhere, one moment invisible, the next moment surrounding the Valkorian fleet from every direction. They were already inside the formation, already past the shields, already aiming their weapons at targets that couldn't respond in time. On the dominance of stars, Vorath stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The screen that had shown empty space moments ago was now filled with red contacts. Human ships, everywhere, behind his fleet, between his ships, above, below, on all sides. Some were positioned less than 100 meters from his own vessel's hull. "How?" he whispered. Admiral Cole's voice came through every speaker in the Valkorian fleet. "High Lord Thesan, your fleet is surrounded. Your flagship is currently targeted by 47 human vessels. We have disabled your shields, locked your weapons, and taken control of your communications." Vorath grabbed his communications console. "This is Fleet Commander Vorath. All ships open fire on the human vessels." Nothing happened. His weapons did not respond. Neither did any ship in his fleet. "You have mocked us," Cole continued. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "You have threatened our children. You have promised to enslave our people. Now you will learn why humanity learned to fight in the dark." Vorath looked out the main viewport. A human ship hung in space directly in front of him, sleek, dark, and somehow terrifying despite being a fraction of the size of his flagship. It had not been there moments ago. He would have sworn on his ancestors' graves that space had been empty. "That's the wrong question," Cole's voice said, as if she could hear his thoughts. "The question isn't how we got here without you seeing us. The right question is, do you want to find out what else we can do?" For the first time in his 40-campaign career, Fleet Commander Vorath felt afraid. Commander Brooks opened a channel to Admiral Cole. "Phase 2 complete. All Valkorian weapon systems are offline. Their shields have been disabled. We have complete fire control across their entire fleet." "Casualties?" Cole asked. "None, on either side, as ordered." "Good. Now let's see if they're smart enough to understand what just happened." Brooks looked at the Valkorian flagship through his viewport. The dominance of stars was drifting now, its engines dead, its weapons silent. The most powerful warship in the Valkorian fleet had been reduced to a floating monument to overconfidence. "Open a channel to their fleet commander," Brooks ordered. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Vorath's console lit up with an incoming transmission. A human face appeared on his screen, a man with dark skin and steady eyes. "Fleet Commander Vorath, my name is Commander Nathan Brooks of the United Earth Navy. As you can see, your fleet has been neutralized. Your ships are intact. Your crews are alive. This was a deliberate choice." Vorath found his voice. "You think disabling our ships means you've won? The Empire has 1,000 fleets. You cannot possibly—" "Commander," Brooks interrupted gently, "please look at your tactical display." Vorath looked. His sensors were back online now, showing the full picture of what had happened. 2,000 Valkorian ships drifted helplessly in space. 500 human vessels held them at gunpoint. And beyond the immediate battle zone, his sensors detected something else. Energy signatures, thousands of them, waiting at the edge of the system. "Those are automated defense platforms," Brooks explained. "We positioned them 3 weeks ago, while your fleet was too busy preparing for conquest to notice. If you had tried to jump to Tau Ceti, you would have encountered them. But that's not the important part." "What is the important part?" Vorath asked through gritted teeth. "The important part is that we've been watching you for 300 years. We know the location of every Valkorian fleet, every shipyard, every colony. We know things about your empire that your own intelligence services don't know." Brooks leaned closer to the camera. "You came here thinking you were the predator and we were the prey. You were wrong." Vorath said nothing. What could he say? His fleet was helpless, his weapons were useless, and the enemy he had dismissed as a joke had just demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible. "We could destroy your fleet right now," Brooks continued. "Every ship, every crew member. We could send a message to the rest of the galaxy that humanity is not to be threatened." He paused. "But we're not going to do that. Because unlike the Valkorian Empire, we don't believe that strength means destruction. Your ships will be repaired. Your crews will be released. You will return home with a story that no one will believe until they see the recordings." Vorath's eyes widened. "You're letting us go?" "We're giving you a choice, Commander. Take this message back to your High Council. Humanity does not want war. We never have. But if you force our hand again, we will not show mercy twice." On the bridge of the UES Resolute, Admiral Catherine Cole watched the confrontation unfold. For 20 years, she had played the role of a weak, humiliated officer. For 20 years, she had endured insults and mockery. Now, finally, the mask was off. "Admiral," Captain Perry said quietly, "we've done it. We've actually done it." Cole nodded slowly. "This isn't the end, Daniel. This is just the beginning. The galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again. Some will fear us. Some will hate us. Some will want to understand how we did it." "And the Valkorians?" Cole looked at the drifting hulk of the dominance of stars. "The Valkorians just learned that there's something more dangerous than a powerful enemy." "What's that?" "An enemy you never saw coming. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, the mighty Valkorian Third Fleet drifted helplessly in space. 2,000 ships had been completely disabled without a single vessel destroyed. Their weapons were offline, their shields were down, their engines were dead. And humanity had not killed a single enemy soldier. Commander Nathan Brooks walked through the corridors of the UES Phantom, heading toward the brig where Fleet Commander Vorath was being held. The Valkorian officer had been transported aboard for a personal conversation before being returned to his people. 2 guards stood at attention as Brooks entered the holding area. Vorath sat on a simple bench, his golden eyes watching the human commander with a mixture of hatred and confusion. "Fleet Commander," Brooks said, taking a seat across from him, "I thought we should talk before you return to your ship." "Talk?" Vorath's voice was bitter. "What is there to talk about? You have humiliated the greatest military power in the galaxy. You have made fools of us all. Is that not enough?" "No, it's not." Brooks leaned forward. "Because humiliation isn't the point. The point is understanding. Understanding what? Why we did what we did, and why we chose to do it this way. Brooks gestured toward the viewport. Through it, the disabled Valkorian fleet was visible, thousands of ships floating in the darkness, their running lights still glowing but their weapons silent. "We could have killed every one of your crew members," Brooks said simply. "Our weapons are capable of cutting through Valkorian armor like paper. We could have turned your entire fleet into debris in less than an hour." "Then why didn't you?" Vorath demanded. "If you wanted to defeat us, why leave us alive?" "Because we don't want to defeat you. We want you to understand us." Brooks's voice was calm but serious. "For 300 years, the galaxy has seen humanity as weak, as prey, as something to be conquered and enslaved. You came here expecting to find frightened colonists begging for mercy. Instead, we found ghosts," Vorath said quietly. "Yes, ghosts that chose not to kill you." Brooks stood and walked to the viewport. "The Valkorian Empire has built its power on destruction. You conquer worlds. You enslave populations. You believe that strength means the ability to cause suffering. That is the way of the galaxy. Maybe, but it's not our way." Brooks turned to face him. "Humanity learned a hard lesson 300 years ago. We learned that the galaxy is dangerous. We learned that if we wanted to survive, we needed to be strong. But we also learned that true strength isn't measured by how many enemies you can destroy." "Then how is it measured?" "By how many enemies you choose not to destroy." Brooks's eyes met Vorath's. "We had your fleet at our mercy. We could have sent a message of terror to the entire galaxy. Instead, we chose to send a different message." Vorath was silent for a long moment. "What message?" "That humanity is not your enemy unless you force us to be. That we would rather have allies than subjects. That we believe the galaxy can be more than an endless cycle of conquest and revenge." The Valkorian officer looked at his captor with new eyes. In his 40 campaigns, he had never encountered an enemy like this. Species that showed mercy were usually weak, but humanity was not weak. They had just proven that, beyond any doubt. Yet they chose restraint anyway. It made no sense, and yet somehow it did. At the emergency session of the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Christopher Lane stood before the assembled species. The chamber that had laughed at humanity 3 months ago was now completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the human representative. Behind Lane, the main display showed footage from the battle. 2,000 Valkorian ships surrounded and disabled by a fleet that had appeared from nowhere. The impossible made real. "For 3 centuries, humanity has been mocked, dismissed, and threatened," Lane began. "We could have revealed our true capabilities at any time. We could have demanded respect through fear. Instead, we waited. We hoped the galaxy would accept us as equals without violence." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You forced our hand. But even now, we extend the same offer we always have: peace, trade, cooperation. The silent war Armada will return to the shadows, and we will continue to present our public fleet as before. The galaxy can pretend nothing has changed." High Lord Thesson was present, though he no longer sat in the highest seat. His purple face was tight, with barely controlled fury. "And if we refuse?" he asked through gritted teeth. "If we choose to avenge this humiliation?" Lane's expression did not change. "Then you will spend the rest of your existence wondering which shadow contains a human warship. We have been watching you for 300 years, High Lord. We know the location of every fleet, every installation, every colony. We know things about your own empire that you do not know." He allowed himself a small smile. "We do not seek war. We never have. But humanity learned long ago that peace must be built on a foundation of strength. You may mock our small ships, our modest presence, our diplomatic patience, but never forget what waits in the dark." The chamber remained silent. For the first time in memory, no species laughed at humanity. 6 months later, the Galactic Concord ratified a new charter. Humanity was granted permanent status as a major power. All territorial claims were recognized and protected. The Valkorian Empire, its pride wounded but its fleet intact, withdrew its expansion toward human space. On Earth, President Marcus Webb addressed the population from the Capitol. Today marks a new chapter in our history, not because we won a battle, but because we proved something important, that strength and mercy can exist together. That we can be powerful without being cruel, that we can demand respect without demanding submission. Admiral Catherine Cole retired from public service. She had played her role perfectly for 20 years, and now younger officers would take her place. But sometimes, late at night, she would look up at the stars from her small house on the coast and smile. Somewhere out there, the silent war Armada kept its endless vigil. Ships that could appear and vanish like ghosts. Crews trained to strike from the shadows. Humanity's secret guardians, waiting in the darkness. Commander Nathan Brooks took command of the Armada after Cole's retirement. He spent his days running training exercises and maintenance checks. He spent his nights wondering if the peace would last. "Do you think they'll come back?" Lieutenant Amy Fisher asked him one evening. They were on the observation deck of Site Omega, watching the stars wheel slowly past. "The Valkorians? Maybe. They're a proud species. Pride doesn't heal quickly." Brooks took a sip of his coffee. "But they're also smart. They know now that attacking humanity would cost them more than they could afford to lose." "And the other species? Some will want to be our friends. Some will want to understand our technology. Some will hate us for changing the balance of power." He shrugged. "That's diplomacy. That's politics. Our job is simpler." "What's our job?" "To make sure that no matter what happens in the negotiating chambers, humanity always has a backup plan waiting in the shadows." Across the galaxy, species that had never thought twice about humanity were now reconsidering. The Kreth, who had massacred millions of humans 3 centuries ago, sent quiet diplomatic feelers about possible reparations. The Sonari requested cultural exchanges. Even some of the smaller species, those who had been bullied by the Valkorians for generations, began to see Earth as a potential ally rather than a victim. The galaxy was not suddenly peaceful. There were still conflicts, still tensions, still species that believed conquest was the only path to greatness. But humanity had changed the equation. They had proven that there was another way, a way that combined strength with restraint, power with mercy. In the end, the Valkorians never attacked human space again. Their empire remained powerful, but it no longer expanded in Earth's direction. Some said they had learned wisdom. Others said they were simply afraid. The truth was somewhere in between, and in the darkness between stars, the silent war Armada continued its endless watch. 500 ships crewed by men and women who hoped they would never be needed again. They were humanity's shield and humanity's secret, a reminder that the species that had once been the laughingstock of the galaxy was now something far more dangerous. Not dangerous because of their weapons, dangerous because they had learned the hardest lesson the galaxy could teach, that survival required sacrifice, that peace required strength, and that the most powerful force in the universe was an enemy who could strike from anywhere, at any time, without ever being seen. The galaxy had mocked humanity's fleet. They would never make that mistake again.